First Person is produced in cooperation with the Far East Broadcasting Company, who rejoice in the stories of changed lives through the power of Jesus Christ. Learn more at febc.org.
Coming out of COVID now, coming out of some of the violence that we've seen on campuses and so on, we're seeing this move of God, which is extraordinary. I really believe that it has been the greatest opportunity that we've seen in over a century.
You will hear from Bob Bakke on this edition of First Person and his belief that something very special is happening spiritually among young college-age people. Welcome to First Person. I'm Wayne Shepherd. I invite you to stay tuned as our guest will outline some of the things he sees happening to indicate a real awakening to the Spirit of God. If you ever miss one of our weekly interviews, they are housed online at firstpersoninterview.com. But perhaps the easiest way to keep up to date is by subscribing to our podcast using your favorite podcast app. Just search for First Person with Wayne Shepherd and subscribe for automatic delivery each week. You can also find us at facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. Dr. Bob Bakke is a longtime friend who has studied movements of prayer and revival of the past in order to view the present climate for spiritual renewal. Today, he sees definite and encouraging signs of life. We spoke online recently and began talking about the years he has spent in ministry and watching for signs of awakening.
Well, as you know, Wayne, I was senior pastor of Hillside Church in Bloomington, Minnesota for 16 years. And before that, I was with the Evangelical Free Church of America as one of its executive directors, focusing on prayer and spiritual awakening. And delightful. My 30 years in Minneapolis, we loved it. We gave ourselves fully to it. We didn't know what we were going to be entering into when we moved there from the New York metropolitan area. But it was a great place to live and a great place to minister. And it opened doors for me in ministry, as you know, because during that season, you and I became friends and we collaborated on numerous broadcasts together. But I left the Minneapolis area 3 years ago, moving to Vero Beach, Florida, and believe me, it's a beautiful place. We have fallen in love with Vero Beach. But from here, then, I left the senior pastorate in order to free myself to become an ambassador for two movements, really. One, with the Timothy Initiative, which is focusing on discipleship and church planting internationally. And it's one of the greatest moves of God I know about that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, and as you've told me about it, I want to focus on that in a future program here. So we may be learning more about that on First Person.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. But the second one is a ministry called OneCry, and I know you're familiar with OneCry.
Mm-hmm.
It sprang out of Life Action Ministries in Buchanan, Michigan, 4 or 5 years ago. And Byron Paulus, who's a dear friend, we sort of launched this together. He's the executive director and he's the backbone of it all. But through OneCry and my role in leadership there, it has opened the door into the collegiate space, which I did not expect. I did not expect that I would be using my retirement focused on the collegiate space, but God is gracious and God is surprising. Mm. And since 2019, I have grown deeper and deeper involved in what is happening among the move of God's Spirit on college campuses. And I'm astounded, as all of us should be. It is a remarkable work of God. The wind of God is blowing. Mm. And in fact, what I say is that this is probably the greatest opportunity that we have seen in 150 years.
Wow.
And if this wave isn't something that you want to surf as a believer in Christ, then I question who and what you are called to.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity, and we're seeing it unfold before our very eyes.
Yeah, I'm going to ask for some specifics, but you know this because you have studied past student movements and how God has used them in years gone by, and you recognize this for what it is.
Yeah, that's right. I have a book. It's out of print. It's called The Power of Extraordinary Prayer. You can still find it on Kindle, Amazon. And it tracks the movements of God, the relationship between prayer movements, united prayer, and great moves of God's Spirit from about 1680 to about 1860. And of course, through that entire season, very, very fruitful season. And in fact, giving birth into the 19th century, which Kenneth Scott Lederat, who's a great Christian historian, would call the golden age of the church, of the evangelical church at least. This gave birth to this golden age. And every time there are these great moves of God's Spirit, which also correspond, by the way, to calamities of some kind or another, or great distress. Mm-hmm. We see this then surge of God's Spirit and this awakening move. So we're finding ourselves in the midst of that, coming out of COVID now, coming out of some of the violence that we've seen on campuses and so on. We're seeing this move of God, which is extraordinary. And I really believe that it has been the greatest opportunity that we've seen in over a century.
Well, tell me more about that. What is happening on these campuses? You've seen some of this firsthand, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. In 2019, I was asked to help produce a stream from a campus in Kansas City, called the Collegiate Day of Prayer. And it was the resurrection of a covenant among churches in America that was made in 1823. 1823, these churches that had been swept up into the Second Great Awakening made a covenant among themselves. In fact, every denomination and association in America joined this covenant to set aside the last Thursday of every month to pray specifically for campuses, to pray for universities and college students. Our churches, they minister to high school students, they minister to middle school students, to elementary school students. They spend great resources on them, but then they graduate and they're gone, and out of sight, out of mind. And so it's no wonder then that we've seen what we have seen in the last 50 years on our college campuses. These leaders, these campus leaders, rediscovered this covenant, and this covenant lasted for 100 years until about World War I or so. And through that was the student volunteer movement. There were revivals on numerous campuses. There was the great expansion of the church with the sending out of missionaries throughout the nations of the earth. All while these covenants of prayer were being pursued. Well, it died out around World War I, like many things did, and then was found again in 2009 among a group of people who were just sitting around reading stuff, and they came upon this covenant, and they said, well, why don't we resurrect this? Why don't we get people praying for the campuses again?
Do it in our day, Lord. Yeah.
Do it in our day. So they started, and it was modest, but by 2019 then, when I was asked to help out, they had achieved a remarkable thing. They had achieved a mobilization of prayer that in fact covered all 4,200 campuses in the United States. They had people prayer walking those campuses. They had people praying over them, churches then praying over them. And since then, we have grown that. There's a ministry, for example, called Every Campus, which is about 120, a collaboration of about 120 campus ministries in the United States. They have joined us, which just sort of exploded the capacity of the Collegiate Day of Prayer and has multiplied the observation of the Collegiate Day of Prayer. And on last Thursdays, and the last Thursday, especially in February, when we do our broadcast, it goes out to thousands of college campuses and many more churches and homes, etc., to create a prayer meeting then that focuses on this generation of students.
Is this truly student-led?
It's student ministry-led. most of the events that happen on college campuses locally are in fact student-led, but of course the production of our broadcast and the collaborations that are needed to make it happen are more student ministry led, if you can make the distinction between the two. So, but students are carrying the weight. And I should say too, just after the Asbury Revival and the Asbury campus revival that happened in 2023, surprising 16 days, our broadcast was on the last day of that outpouring of God's Spirit. Surprised us all. We had been on the campus, working with the campus for 9 months before the outbreak of that revival. And so when our stream went on air, we were a very modest broadcast before then. But when we went on air that night, we had 7 television networks that carried the signal globally. And we had 5 million just on our stream,
Wow.
5 million viewers. And from that, everything has changed. Everything has changed in every campus across the country. Something broke loose, and it has not ceased to impress. In fact, if you look at the latest Barna research, Barna shows that as of 2023 and onward, the spike in belief in Jesus, where the question is asked, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and is it still important to you? That has jumped, has skyrocketed 16%, which they cannot find. I think it goes back maybe even 50 years, perhaps even to World War II. It's the sharpest spike upward. And among Gen Z, it is the only demographic in America, the only demographic that is growing with regard to that question. So everyone else, from boomers, you and I, our generation comes up last on that list. But every other generation is probably static or has declined somewhat. But Gen Z has broken the mold, has broken that static, and it is climbing. It's really astounding to them.
There's more we can learn from our guest today. We'll continue with Bob Bakke on this edition of First Person. Here's Ed Cannon on the vision for FEBC's weekly podcast.
The primary purpose of Until All Have Heard, of course, is to share the experience that FEBC has because we have staff on the ground in so many oppressive places. But in addition to that, we're trying to speak to you in a way that only the kind of testimonies you'll hear from around the globe can do.
Discover how the gospel is making a difference around the world. Search for Until All Have Heard on your favorite podcast platform, or hear it online at febc.org. My guest is Dr. Bob Bakke. Bob is a retired pastor, but no one has his finger on the pulse of what's happening among Gen Z spiritually than Bob, because I know you study this and follow this so closely and have these campus connections, Bob. So I'm anxious to learn more about Gen Z. We hear a lot. We hear both good things and disturbing things about this generation. Tell me your perspective. What do you observe and what do you see?
Well, I think they are, again, the most open to the gospel that we have seen in our lifetime. And I was transformed by the Jesus movement in the 1970s. That changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my life. Never been the same since. When I left Taylor University, having been impacted by the Jesus movement and went off, I thought I would be doing X, and I ended up doing Y. And that Y was into the pastorate, into the seminary.
And by the way, as all the attention was turned to the Jesus movement in the day, I don't think, and it's taken all these years later to see the impact of it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's true. The fruit of it is still being born.
Yeah.
And we're still rejoicing in it. But I think there's something greater that's happening even now. But they are so open. The number one longing, the recent poll, number one longing among Gen Z is to talk to God, and the second one is to know God. So prayer is the first thing that they long to know about, and of course the second thing is the object of our praying, is the God to whom we pray. So the Bible is down on that list, maybe 4 or 5 down on that list, but they long to know God. And of course, we have to bring that truth to them so that they know who they are, in fact, talking to. But it's astounding. Let me just give you an example.
Okay.
Soon after Asbury, I met a woman by the name of Tanya Pruitt. Tanya Pruitt was the wife of a basketball coach on the college campus of Auburn University. Tanya had raised up a group of people who would prayer walk the Auburn campus. I think she started out with a few students, but ended up with maybe like 200 or so that would prayer walk the campus. And soon after Asbury and the move of God's Spirit that broke loose, God gave her a vision of arenas, basketball arenas. I think principally in the SEC at that time.
Started home, huh?
Yeah, started home. Of basketball arenas filled with students who are responding to the gospel. And she went about with her husband as a coach, basketball coach. She went about the business of securing the basketball arena at Auburn University. And she, with students who were mobilizing with her, just began telling people that we're going to meet, and we're going to meet with God. And I think it was 7,000 or 8,000 people, kids, showed up. And most of this is texting, is word of mouth, just come and we're going to meet with God. And if you haven't seen the pictures, there was a longing after thousands of kids had responded to the invitation to receive Christ or to devote themselves once again to the life of Christ. There was a longing then to be baptized. And they found a pond outside on the edge of campus. And late at night, they drove their cars out. All the students lined up around the pond with their automobiles and turned their lights on. So they're in the middle of the night till early in the morning, they were baptizing hundreds of kids in this pond. And it has gone on from campus to campus. They have now gone to 17 campuses. They have somewhere between 15 and 20,000 kids who have come to Christ. They have seen over 100,000 in attendance, and they have more invitations around the country than they know what to do with. And all of this is driven by the students. Tanya, it isn't like Billy Graham has this professional team, and they'll come and whatever, they'll put on a show or some show like that. No. The students must invite them. The students must do all the work. The students must mobilize. The students must get the arena. It's all driven by the students, and the students are responding.
So it's grassroots, is what you're saying. Yeah,
it's grassroots. I've never seen anything like it. And now they have 17 campuses under their belts, and it continues to climb. I think we'll see another 8 or 10 this year.
Wow. I've also read some reports of this happening in England, for example, as well. Have you seen those reports?
In fact, I was on the phone just 2 weeks ago to the UK. In January of last year, they had a gathering of about 3,000 in Krakow, Poland, and this is called Revive Europe. Next March have, if I'm not mistaken, I think they said 30 cities. around Europe where there will be host cities. I could be mistaken on that, but there's multiples of them. So yes, it is growing. And there have, just a couple of weeks ago, there were thousands of people in the streets of Rome and in Paris as well. There was another. And again, this is Gen Z driven. It's really quite remarkable. That's why I say I don't think we've seen it. This is the greatest opportunity we've seen in our lifetime and in over a century.
So let me ask, given the report that you've given us, what does it do in your heart to see this young generation, this Gen Z group, respond to the Spirit this way? And second of all, how should we respond to what we see and hear, and how can we encourage them in this without taking it over? Do you know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah. Well, a couple of things. Barna recently came out with a State of the Church, and they addressed this. If you go onto Barna's website, I think you can find the presentation called the State of the Church, and they find that the younger generation, even though it's on the rise, there's a great need for discipleship, and there's a great need for them to be woven into the fabric of the local church. They have, as you and I know, it's one thing to draw a crowd. It's one thing to have large events and have these responses, but then to weave these precious souls into the life of Christ, into the life and the woof and the wharf of a local body of believers, and to be discipled. That's another challenge entirely. And so we should be praying for that. We should be praying for disciple makers. We should be praying. I got an email the other day from a guy in Waco, Texas, and he says the student leaders in churches that he knows of, they're going 5 nights a week. They're packed to the rafters with these kids, and they're pouring themselves into discipling these kids. This is what needs to happen. The church needs to rise and disciple that which God is doing.
Something obviously is going on, and at the very least, we need to pray that it continues.
Yes, and I hope your audience will join us for the Collegiate Day of Prayer. If you go to collegiatedayofprayer.org, collegiatedayofprayer.org, one word, and mobilize your local church to pray for this generation. Again, this is the greatest opportunity that we've had in our lifetimes. Pray into this generation. Join us in mobilizing the local church to pray for this generation.
We have to stop right there, but it's such an important point Bob is making about our role in what we see as a stirring in today's world for spiritual renewal and awakening. Our guest has been Dr. Bob Bakke, whose heart has always been on the lookout for such a movement in our day. We'll put a link to the Collegiate Day of Prayer and the Timothy Initiative websites at firstpersoninterview.com. And in an upcoming program, we'll focus on the Timothy Initiative. The spiritual hunger is worldwide, and the Far East Broadcasting Company has seen many of the signs and places it serves. There are many exciting developments taking place. Explore them at febc.org. The Far East Broadcasting Company is a partner in bringing you these first-person interviews and invites you to listen to the podcast Until All Have Heard, available everywhere you get podcasts and also at febc.org. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us next time for First Person.